Greetings, students, and welcome to this special edition of The Professor Travel Domestic Edition. I am your host, The Professor Travel, coming to you from Orange County, California. This is the website, the vlog, and the podcast that you come to in order to learn more about different travel destinations. Hopefully, this will develop a discussion between you and other members of the community. We hope this inspires you to travel more when you have the opportunity to do so and enjoy life more. Now, you can always reach me on my website at theprofessortravel.com, but you are also welcome to find me on both YouTube and Facebook at The Professor Travel. I am available on TikTok at The Professor Travel. If you're an Instagrammer, you can find me there at the_professor_travel. I'm on Twitter, if you're a Twitterer, at The Professor TR1. And then if you're a blogger, you can find me on Blogspot at theprofessortravel.blogspot.com. Today, I am so thrilled to have a visiting professor back for oh gosh, I think this is the fifth time we've had conversations.
Fourth or fifth, yeah.
Yeah. So welcome again, our visiting professor, Marissa Paul Frederico. How are you today?
Hey, everybody. I'm not bad. We can breathe again here in Oregon from the forest fire.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's such a crazy time with all the fires that are going up and down the West Coast right now. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Oregon, but before we do that, and as is evident from your mug that you're drinking out of right now, yay, Oregon.
Right.
For those of my students who have not heard your previous vlog or podcast, can you give us a little bit of your credentials, such as your educational background and maybe some places that you've traveled?
Sure. My educational background is varied. I teach college. I teach both the undergrad and master's level. International business, but I have traveled all over the world, and I spent over 25 years, almost 30 years in the travel and tourism industry. So, you know, I do teach international business, so I kind of combined the old career with the new career.
And then,
I'm a photographer also. That's my passion. That's my love, is being a photographer. So
yes, and of course, we're going to be talking about domestic travel on this specific occasion. And you've traveled all over the U.S. as well, correct?
I have. I mean, there are a lot of places I still have yet to visit, and my plan was always, once I got older, I would, settle down and do things easier domestically.
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding, life used to be out here, and now it's right here. So I'm hoping to still get a lot more international travel in, but yeah, I have been quite a few places domestically.
Excellent. Well, on the topic of Oregon today, we're going to talk a little bit about a variety of different things, but let's start with their history. Talk to me a little bit about what you're aware of in terms of the history of Oregon.
Sure, you bet. I haven't been living in Oregon that long, maybe about 6 years now, 5.5 years, almost going on 6, but it's got a really interesting history, and not a good one, not in a good way. Aside from the Oregon Trail, which pretty much everybody knows about, all the settlers coming west went via the Oregon Trail for the most part. It has a very racist history, which is kind of sad. It was a whites-only territory. You could, unless you were a slave. If you were a slave, you could stay. Of course, you had to stay. But even post-Civil War, or leading up to the Civil War, I should say, it was really, if you were a free Black person, or even Hispanic, you could, come and work on the farms, but you had to leave. In order to get statehood in 1859, they were forced, you can't be a whites-only state. So you either stay a territory or you change your policies. Well, they changed their policies, but there's still vestiges of that left in the state today. And I don't mean necessarily by the way of hardcore racism, although there is, this is America. But it's more just the fact that there is a much higher white population here than in other states, than in a lot of other states, especially on the West Coast.
What about more recent history? Anything really huge or monumental happened over the last few years, since like the 1950s?
Yeah, actually, I mean, Portland became really kind of a mecca for creativity and arts, and so you see that Oregon has become very diverse in the Portland metro area, and even Eugene and Salem. Eugene being a college town, Corvallis being a college town, because of the college towns and the draw of these colleges. They're very good universities. It has become much more diverse, so that's really good. It's also because of that, and we'll talk about that towards the end. Become a lot more political. A lot more liberal politics happen here, which is a good thing. But it's got good flavor. It's really a melting pot of ideas here in Oregon.
I'm really quite taken. Like when I look at the different states and how they evolve, I almost look at Oregon as kind of a time capsule, because it seems like, from an environmental standpoint, they have a vestige of a huge amount of forest still, and have a lot of nature involved with that. Has not, like, we could talk about the timber industry, and we'll talk about that shortly, but you still have vast amounts of forest, vast amounts of very, very lush community. So when people go there, I kind of almost think it's unchanged since the 1800s, or when settlers started to come out initially.
Yeah.
To see,
in a lot of ways, you're correct. I mean, it's not as populated as most other states in the West, or and I don't mean just West Coast, but west of the Rockies. It's less populated. But primarily, I mean, we've talked about this. There's a Bigfoot festival every year, except this year, of course, because of COVID. But when people talk about things like Bigfoot, come on, how could you have not seen something? Well, when you get a look at some of the dense forest here, just outside of Oregon, like in between where I live and the coast, you could see where some unknown species could be living, and that no human has been back there in 100 years, because it is very dense forest. It's a rainforest.
Well, and that's another thing. When people think in terms of forested areas, there are places down in South America that have not been touched by humans, that still have tribes that like almost never see anything. Yeah. And there have been anthropological studies on that too, which I think are fascinating. But I digress. Let's move into the geography of the area, since we're already talking a little bit about that. Talk to me about some of what it looks like.
Well, Oregon, it has, like California, Oregon has some really diverse geography. If you go west of the Cascade Mountains, which, it's considered Eastern Oregon, it's much more desert. You do get, it's high desert, it's not low desert. So, it still gets snow and what have you. Western Oregon is very wooded and foresty and rainforest and dense, and we get rain 9 months of the year, which is a good thing, as it turns out. So it's located in a really interesting area, the Pacific Northwest in its entirety, Washington, Oregon, and parts of Northern California. Very foresty, and there's a lot of fishing, crabbing. I go crabbing every year in November. Catch my own crab. Yeah.
Oh wow, crab! Yeah. Very cool.
I put on my crabbing duds, and I go out there, get on a boat, and we catch our own crab.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really diverse.
Excellent. And I know that California and Washington border. Is it Idaho's the other border? Okay.
Yeah, Idaho is the other border.
Okay, fantastic. So in terms of the weather, we already talked about the saturation points and the precipitation that you guys have a lot of. Does that create like mudslide issues or anything kind of crazy like that?
No. And in fact, it's really interesting coming from, originally being from Southern California and dealing with mudslides and what have you. No, because it's a rainforest, first of all, it's geographically set up for that. It's not low desert like Southern California, so it's accustomed to it and it's set up for it. On the other hand, we don't get huge storms, except for the other night, which was really, we enjoyed. Typically, it just piddles all for 9 months. We joke around and we say, if you are using an umbrella in Oregon, you are a visitor. You're not from here, because the hoodie is the state uniform. You just pull your hood up, because it's a drizzle all for 9 months.
Okay. And just again in reference to why it was so nice to have that rain a couple of days ago is because obviously you guys have the wildfires that are raging up and down the coastline,
Yeah,
like all the way from Washington down to Southern California, actually all the way up to Canada. I think they
all
were
the way
having
to
problems.
Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, they were having challenges too. Any like when I think of Southern California, or when I think of California in general in terms of natural disasters, I think of earthquakes, obviously, um, but that's pretty much about it. Like, is there anything that you have to worry about in Oregon in terms of that?
Oh yeah, volcanoes.
Oh,
we sit right on the Pacific Rim with all the volcanoes. I mean, we're surrounded. When you're in downtown Portland, actually from my house, you can see Mount Hood,
mhm.
so it is visible. But when you're in downtown Portland, if you're on one of the bridges going across the river, you can see Mount Adams. You can see Mount St. Helens, what's left of it.
Yeah.
You can see, of course, Mount Hood, which is the closest. So yeah, we're really in the ring of fire here. And although, you know, it's it's not happened in our lifetime, that doesn't mean it can't.
Well, but I mean, like St. Helens erupted in '80, and I remember
Yeah,
that, and
yeah. And
it blew the side of the entire mountain off.
well, yeah, and what people don't realize, and I didn't realize at the time, is, you know, you think, okay, Mount St. Helens is in Washington, you think immediately, oh, you know, Seattle and what have you, but no, it's actually closer as the crow flies to Portland. So Portland actually got more of the ash than Seattle did.
Oh, I remember getting ash in Southern California.
Oh
Like
yeah, me too.
I was in I'm dating myself now, but I was in the third grade, and I remember ash falling out of the sky when that happened. It was crazy,
Yeah,
and the air condition was, or air
air quality.
quality was
Yeah,
terrible, and they were like, no, you need to stay indoors as much as possible over the
yeah.
next week or so. So
I
yeah,
was older than the third grade, so we'll
just
just go with
barely,
that.
just barely. You were like a year older, maybe.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
awesome. So the culture. Now, this is where we really get into a diverse difference between, say, Washington and Oregon. Because Washington, when I
Oh
think
yeah,
of Washington and Oregon, they're very intertwined, but there's definitely some very, very different
very different.
things that go on between the two states. Is there a predominant religion within Oregon?
No, no, there
Okay.
isn't. It's really a mishmash.
Okay. Now, the art community, on the other hand, is very, very different. Whereas in, say, for example, the state of Washington, the art community is not as well-rounded or diverse. But when I think of the art community in Oregon, I mean, I obviously gravitate towards the more chaotic art, the more
Hmm.
contemporary arts, the
Street
murals, the
art.
graffiti. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's a lot of different things I think are that are quite interesting and beautiful about that.
Mhm.
In fact, one of the things I want to mention, just in reference to even music, when I flew into the Portland airport the last couple of times, they would have students from the University of Portland, I think, or the
Mhm.
University of Oregon. At the actual terminals playing music, and so you
Oh
got
yeah,
to, like, you're entertained as you go through the terminals with everything
absolutely.
from violinist to, there was an earth harpist there had that literally had this monster,
Yep.
like, for anybody who doesn't know what an earth harp is, that thing is the size of the entire room. It's crazy. So I mean, you're obviously entertained while you're at the airport, but that just goes to show the differences in the various different types of art and community that you have in that general area. Like, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. You know, it's really interesting. Portland is it is very diverse as far as art goes. You can really pretty much find anything you want. Of course have mainstream art. We have the Portland Five, which are the five theaters downtown that do all the Broadway productions come through, which I go to on a regular basis. Well, until now.
Yeah.
But yet we also have, you know, a lot of community theater. We have a lot of eclectic art, street art. We have, you know, it's really become one of those cultures with regards to art, as you know, letting people do what they do. And you know, the saying "keep Portland weird." Oh, you know, Austin, Texas, and Portland have always argued about who said that first. But we've actually taken it seriously and painted it on the wall.
Okay.
So "keep Portland weird" is a saying here. It's the unofficial Portland slogan for a reason, and it's because we really like the artistic endeavor of people doing artistically what they want to do. I mean, we have a naked bike ride every year. This year it wasn't completely naked. I think they were wearing masks. So, it was an allowance, but yeah, it is very diverse, which makes it a lot of fun, actually.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of language, I think it's predominantly English in most of the area. There's not really a huge Spanish speaking or French.
There isn't. And the interesting thing about Oregon is, we do have large Hispanic populations, but most of them have been here for decades, or even longer. 3 and 4 generations. So, having been here for 3 or 4 generations, they mostly speak English. Of course, there is Spanish spoken here, and I love when I get the chance to use my Spanish. But yeah, it's a lot of old families, Hispanic families, which it becomes varied. You get a little bit of both, but mostly English here.
Okay, and let's move on to one of my favorite topics, which is food. The food community in Portland and in Oregon in general is very diverse. What are your favorites? What are your favorite, like, either restaurants or food items that you got that primarily gravitate towards your area? Because I will say the only thing that I've really heard of, and again, it's a touristy thing, is the Voodoo Donuts thing, but that's
very touristy.
Very touristy.
Locals don't buy Voodoo Donuts.
No, but talk to me. No, but talk to. Well, yeah, I like them. They're kind of cool. It's like, oh, I got a pink box. I'm taking that through customs or whatever. But talk to me about what are some of your favorites up there?
Well, Portland is really known as a foodie city, so it's kind of fun. Some of the best restaurants in the world have opened up here. I think we even have a couple of Michelin star restaurants. We're known. One of the things we're known for are our food carts. We have food cart pods all over the city, even in the outer, the suburbs, which is kind of where I live, just Portland Metro, but it's just outside Portland City. I live in Beaverton, and we have food cart pods, which are extremely popular, and a lot of the major restaurants get their start as a food cart pod.
Really?
Yeah, our food cart pods have been written up in magazines like Bon Appetit and all these foodie magazines and what have you, and foodie news programs, because it's just it's really, there's a wide variety of food here. Some of our best is Indian food. One of my favorite restaurants, and I'm going to give them a shout out, is Chennai Masala in Beaverton. People will come from all over the Portland metro area to come to this particular Indian restaurant, even though we have tons of them. They're just excuse me, they're just well known for their exquisite food, and they deliver to where I live. But yeah, we have everything. Thai, you name it. We're very big on bacon here for some reason. It's a bacon crazy city. I don't know why. I don't know how that happened. Maybe hog farmers. I don't know. But we really have a little bit of everything. If you want it, you can get it, except there isn't a really good Jewish deli. And that's the one thing I miss.
You know what? It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I've been all over the world, as have you. And while New York had a few good Jewish delis, my favorite was in Phoenix, Arizona. And I don't know why. It's like, and even here in Southern California, it's like, there's some good ones, but it's like my favorites haven't necessarily been, like, I guess it's a matter of taste too, but speaking, by the way, on Rosh Hashanah, by the way. So
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. So in terms of the sports teams and recreation, talk to me about some of the sports teams that are up in your area.
Well, this is Nike town, so got to tell you, sports is in our blood here, even though my idea of sports is going from my desk to the coffee maker. We have really good sports teams here, and Nike has sponsored so many of them to become the great sports teams they are.
I know there's Trailblazers.
The Trailblazers, of course, the Blazers. This is also called Rip City. I don't know why. I don't know really what it means. It has something to do with basketball, but that's all I know. Trailblazers are huge here. We don't have our own football team. People tend to root for the Seattle Seahawks if they're going to root for a team, or it's a free-for-all. With football,
is there a baseball team?
There isn't a professional baseball team. I shouldn't say there isn't an A-League professional baseball team. But we have the local Hillsboro Hops, which is a farm team. Hops as in, which make beer out of, because that's part of our food culture, by the way, is
Welcome
we have
to
more
Oregon.
breweries than any other state. More breweries and more strip clubs. It's really a weird place, but yeah, don't ask. But yeah, we don't really, but what we do have is professional soccer, and professional soccer is huge here. The Timbers is the male team, and I can't remember the female team, but some of the fans are known as the Timbers Army. And they take it seriously, and don't cross them, because they're an army.
I've seen soccer all over the world, and people die when they start to cross other teams. It's not pleasant. Yeah. So I mean, not that's the case in the United States. I don't think we've had any.
No. I mean, we take army loosely, but there is a sports army.
Yeah,
they love their team.
And again, just to confirm, there's no state holidays like King Kamehameha's birthday in Hawaii or Founders Day in Utah. Okay, good.
Unfortunately, no. We wish there would be, but there no.
Well, like every day's a holiday there,
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Now the population. So the population of Oregon is just a little over 4 million people. So, which I imagine most of them are congregated around those cities primarily. Yeah, but there's still a relatively large rural community, and like as you said, you guys do grow different types of products and have those in your area, especially if you have things like beer and that's one of the major producers in the area. So I mean, there's lots of different things that are mounted from there. But as we talked about, as far as the businesses go, there is a huge number of major grade A companies that are based in Oregon. And can you elaborate on just a few of those?
Yeah, I mean, Oregon, or the Western Oregon, I should say, Portland area, has become known as the Silicon Forest. Because 1972, Nike started out here in a garage. My wife works for Nike, so
cool.
We're only allowed to wear Nike here.
We
don't mention the other company that is also here, Adidas. But they have a much smaller presence. Nike,
well, if the shoe fits.
If the shoe fits. Here in Beaverton, where I live, this is Nike Town. It's like 6 city blocks. It's a massive campus with a lake in the middle. It's quite impressive. The largest employer is Intel. Intel is also out here in the Beaverton, Hillsboro area, little more towards Hillsboro, sorry. And huge employer, largest employer in all of Oregon, and then Nike. But we have Columbia Sportswear, which is headquartered here. Wonderful stuff, also in Beaverton. There's Daimler that has a large presence here. And then the Collins companies, which also, you also have Weyerhaeuser, which, the paper companies, because of course, Oregon's history was a logging, and it still is. It's amazing when you see these logging trucks still today, but we don't deforest, we replant. So nothing is clear cut. Areas are cut and then they're replanted with a date. And that area, they won't go back to that for 20, 30, 50 years. And 75% of the, let me see, I have to look at my statistics, excuse me.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, 75%, I was right. 75% of all of the forest products, whether it's wood or paper or Christmas trees, it comes from private property, but it's always replanted and replenished. So we're very big on, you take a little bit, but you give back more.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the travel and transportation. This is an area that I'm not totally familiar with in the Oregon area, because when I think of Oregon, obviously, as we've made mention a number of times now, it's a very lush area. There's a lot of trees. So naturally I'm thinking, okay, well, it might be like a lot of off-road, and there might be some challenges with just getting from place to place. But you seem to infer earlier, when I spoke with you prior to the recording of this, that's not the case, that there's actually a fairly robust transportation sector in there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, as far as Portland Metro goes, we have the MAX, which is a light rail, and it goes everywhere. It goes, all out to all of the suburbs. It even goes right into the airport at the terminal. So it makes it easy for someone to go back to the airport or, leave the airport and get someplace they need to go without having to deal with a rental car or an Uber or anything like that. So where I live in the suburbs, yeah, we have light rail, and we use it, a lot of times when we want to go into the city, which is, 10 minutes away by car. But even still, so we don't have a lot of train depots. They used to, of course. The rest of it is roads. People, use the roads to get places, and we have a very good road infrastructure. They're not huge roads, although the I-5 does come right through Oregon and is a highly used road. But we, when you're out we have good farm roads, and one of the fun things to do is, when I drive to work, when I'm teaching on campus, I typically will go the farm roads because it's fun. I mean, it's beautiful. It would take me like an hour to get to work. And by the time I got to work, I was so relaxed because I'm just in the middle of the farms and it's just beautiful. So our road system is very good. You can get anywhere you need to get. Occasionally you'll go somewhere and you'll hit maybe a dirt road, but you don't need to go on that dirt road. There is always a beautiful tarmac option. So
okay, and obviously we talked about the Portland Airport, which I think is just one of the most beautiful ones that I've been in a long time. Yeah. And then in terms of tourism within your area, what would you say are the highlights of someone who wants to go to Oregon? Like, why would a person want to go make Oregon a destination?
Well, mostly it's to come to Portland. I mean, I personally have been all over Oregon because I, get in my car and I do photography shoots. And in fact, we're going to talk about one of those next week. But, I really enjoy all parts of Oregon because there's just beauty everywhere here. But people tend to come to Portland because it's such a diverse city and there's a lot to see and do. You've got, the Willamette River going right through. You're not far from the Columbia River, just on the other side of Portland. And then we're, an hour and a half from the ocean. So you get, Cannon Beach and Seaside and, crabbing. And there's just a lot of different stuff to see and do here. And Portland is a fun city. In fact, I've somewhat termed it like San Francisco light. Because it's much smaller, it's easy to navigate, but it is somewhat reminiscent of San Francisco, but with really, really nice people. Everybody in Oregon is really nice. That is one thing I will tell your travelers. If you want to come to a place where people say please and thank you and you're welcome and hold doors open, Oregon's your place. And we don't honk here. No, we'll wait until the light turns red, and then we'll get out of our car and say, "Are you okay?" We don't honk. Yeah, it's a weird thing here.
All right, so let's talk about some government information. Now, I believe that the state right now, at least, is predominantly run by the Democratic Party.
It is. It's a blue state.
Yeah, so it's a blue state. Talk to me a little bit about your knowledge about what goes on, because you've done a little bit of lobbying in your days.
I have done lobbying. I used to be the vice president of the Liberal Gun Club.
Okay.
I know that doesn't sound like it belongs in the same sentence, but believe it or not, we have a huge liberal gun owner population here, because Oregon is having been so rural and what have you. It's not because of crime, but because of being so rural. Gun laws are very, very lax here. We do have them, but it's just because it's always been the way it is. But so as part of that function, I would go to the state government and lobby with my friend who was the president. And, we would lobby Democrats that were staunch gun opponents and said, look, these are some of the measures that we also like for gun safety. But, let's not get crazy here, because craziness one way or the other is going to lose elections. But we have an interesting state government. It's really kind of mixed. Out of the cities, it's mostly Democrats, and rural areas, it's mostly Republican. It's a really small picture of what the rest of the country is like. Rural red, city blue.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. It seems like a lot of places up and down the West Coast are really very blue. based on your opinion, and last time, and I'll give you a little snapshot story. When I flew into Portland, I had an Uber driver who I was talking with on the way to one of my campus locations, and he was indicating, that there's a certain amount of the population that's not very happy because you have a lot of people that are influxing, moving into Oregon from California because the property prices are very inexpensive.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not
so,
anymore.
so I guess my question is, is that primarily where the influx is coming from? Is it from California or like
It
from
is,
people?
and we have a very anti-California sentiment here. I know a lot of people here that were originally from California, but I tend to say I moved here from Utah rather than, and I moved here from Utah. I was living there for 3 years before moving to Oregon. So yeah, you don't really want to say you're from California here because there's a lot of resentment, and fair enough. I mean, rightly so. There's a lot of resentment of the Californians that have, come up to Oregon, and they've driven prices up. It's, I mean, when I first moved here in 2015, even, we bought an expensive house for $290,000. You can't touch anything for that. I mean, this in December we sold a 364 square foot studio apartment for 160,000.
Oh my
So you
gosh.
this in 5 years, the difference in prices and what have you. I mean, we just bought the house I'm in right now. We just bought this in March also, and it has increased in value just in that space of time by about no, it was at $70,000.
Yeah. I mean, the
In
housing market right now is crazy. I
crazy.
mean, yeah,
Yeah.
we bought a place in Southern California. I mean, tangent, sorry. We bought our condo in Southern California in 2000 and like January 2018 for about 250, and
Mhm.
we sold it last month for almost 300,000. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, in that small window of time, it's like
Yeah.
50,000.
Yeah.
I
Our other house, the one that was 290 in 2015, we sold for 406 in May.
yeah, it's
Right in the
amazing
middle
how
of the pandemic.
yeah,
So yeah,
but I mean, again, that also affects the inventory levels too.
that's what people complain about here is that their affordable housing is really a misnomer because
Yeah.
there isn't any.
So, I mean, of course, resources within the Oregon community, we know that timber is one of the
Wood.
huge, it's all about the forest. What other things is the state known for?
Christmas trees.
Oh, yes, of
Okay,
course.
it's wood, but Christmas trees. Likely, if wherever you are in at least the Western United States, if you're buying a Christmas tree this year, it came from Oregon. So yeah, Christmas trees, wood, paper,
Mhm.
um, tennis shoes,
Yeah,
athletic clothing, of course, Nike and what have you. Your computer chips, Intel.
yeah,
So yeah, but I mean, but as far as resources, it's primarily wood products
yeah, it makes
and
sense.
paper, wood and paper.
Now, you're obviously part of the educational community, as am I. Talk to me a little bit about what you know in terms of K through 12, and then obviously the college community as well.
Sure. One of the nice things about Oregon is we have a 97% literacy rate, which is really high, especially for the United States. Um, people tend to look at Oregon and say, oh, you're Hicks or whatever. No, we have a 97% literacy rate. It's very, very important here. Or the universities, K through 12, great. I have several friends that are teachers at K through 12. The governor has decided not to open the schools and continue doing distance learning because we don't want our kids sick. But the colleges are great here. There's a wide variety. You've got the University of Oregon.
Mhm,
You've got Oregon State, which you've got a picture of there.
mhm.
I would have preferred you had University of Oregon
Sorry.
Beavers up there, but okay, your choice, your podcast. The reason I say that is because I teach at Oregon Tech,
Mhm.
Oregon Institute of Technology, which is part of the Oregon State University system and Oregon State Beavers are part of that. We're the Oregon Tech Owls.
Hmm.
We do have sports teams actually, but we're very highly ranked as far as universities go in the United States. Ranked 35th overall for all types of 4-year university technically focused colleges. So we have a lot to choose from here. As far as we've got Reed College, which we also call Weed College. We've got
Okay. Is is
University.
is 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 um is marijuana legal in the state of Oregon?
Oh yeah, it has been since 2016. Well, it was medicinally legal for a long
Yeah,
time here, but it's been like
recreationally legal.
recreational legal since 2016.
Okay.
In fact, when I moved my dad here a month and a half ago, first thing I did, had some pain in his shoulder. I said, "Come on, pops, let's go into a weed store." We bought some. Come on, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, I like this."
God bless him. One thing also, really quickly, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but I'll run it by you anyways. For the University of Oregon, their mascot is the Ducks,
Yeah,
and so that's their sports team. It's fairly well known, and the mascot looks surprisingly familiar because a lot of people mistake that with Donald Duck
yeah.
from Disney. Now, from what I understand, prior to I think prior to Disneyland or prior to um, the inception of a lot of Walt Disney's contracts, there was actually two logos that were created by Walt Disney that were able to be used outside of the Disney products, and one of them was the
Oregon Ducks.
the Oregon Ducks, and the other one was the Arizona Sun Devils.
Yeah.
Both of those two were ironically created by and are in association with Walt Disney and are able to be used by those schools. So I think that's just a really fascinating story, especially because Disney is the Disney lawyer fandom is a little challenging sometimes, and so
Yeah.
I was really surprised when I heard that that was still out there and that they didn't sue to have that taken over. It's like, no, I guess that's built into that contract.
Built into the contract, absolutely.
So interesting. Now, in terms of the healthcare system in Oregon, you guys have a fairly good and robust healthcare system.
Excellent healthcare system. As a matter of fact, under Obamacare, Oregon has one of the best plan choices if you are underemployed or unemployed, where things are practically free. It is a phenomenal system. I just got my dad onto a Medicare supplement plan when he moved here. For the same price he was paying in Utah, he's getting the works. So yeah, we have a very robust health system, great hospitals, the Providence system. We've got OSHU, which is a research hospital. In fact, right near us, they're at one of the Providence hospitals. They are constructing a heart transplant wing.
Oh, wow.
So, and this is an important factor why a lot of people have moved to Oregon, and we should touch upon this, is because Oregon is the first state in the country to allow assisted suicide,
Okay.
and the right to die the way you choose if you are terminally ill.
Yeah. It's a really touchy subject for a lot of people, but it's one of those ones that if unfortunately you have a family member or you yourself are struck with cancer or something to that extent, and it is your wishes. I mean, obviously you
Yeah.
want to know what your options are, and if Oregon does provide you with an option that you feel is appropriate for you and your family, then and your faith, obviously, then that's an important choice you need to be able to make. And if Oregon, has it built into their constitution that's the case, and that should be that should that's a fantastic option. Then
It is a wonderful thing because no, you're not just allowed to kill yourself. I mean, people do, of course, but I mean,
yeah.
you can't just say, "Oh, I'm sick and I'm going to kill myself." It has to be, done through your doctor, and it's assisted, but it's a right to die with dignity law, basically.
And painless in some cases, because again, you have, like you mentioned, a person who commits suicide. Unfortunately, that's a very difficult
Right.
situation, and they could screw it up even worse, and then
Absolutely.
the situation could prevent them from actually dying and make their whole life even worse than it is. But then if you have an assisted physician or a physician assisted suicide situation, then yeah, it becomes a smoother transition,
Yeah.
obviously.
And it's only for terminally ill.
Correct.
I don't want people to think that we just say, "Yeah, I don't want to live anymore." Um, but it's really, you know, and of course, you know, if your faith doesn't believe in that, nobody's forced to do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
It's an option for people, and that is why I have a cousin who moved here. She, you know, has had cancer 3 times, and she moved to Astoria, Oregon, with the idea that if and when the time comes, that she'll have that option.
And then let's talk about the communication structure in Oregon, because again, when I think of Oregon, I think of it in terms of, you know, a lush wooded community everywhere. I don't know how the digital infrastructure is, or how advanced the cellular structure is. Talk to me a little bit about what you're aware of in terms of how that's set up.
Sure. Um, I think just like pretty much anywhere in the States, just like even California, we have really good infrastructure. Of course, now I will tell you, when I drive to the coast from Portland to the coast, you go through a very heavily wooded area, and for several miles, I may not have, you know, reception, or even, you know, or very good reception, because it's hard to get a cell tower in the middle of very dense forest where Bigfoot may take it down. Okay. What's that? Knock it down. But we do, for the most part, we have very, very good service. High-speed internet everywhere. When I travel, I usually have to work, so I've really never been in a place where I haven't had any type of service. Although I will say, one house we did look at buying not far from here, a little bit, you know, more in the forest, Banks, Oregon.
Mm.
Loved the house. It was like 6 or 7 acres up in the top of the mountain hill, and but it had no internet capability or cell service, and so we had to say no. We can't do this.
That's a major breaker in a lot of cases these days.
Yeah. Based on what we do for a living, no, it wasn't possible. So there are areas that don't have good service still.
Yeah. And then safety and security. Obviously, you're in a state that's heavily wooded, so the fire community, obviously, in your area is an important resource, or the firefighting community, I want to say.
You know, it is, but what happened this year, and most of the fires are in Eastern Oregon, or, you know, southeastern Oregon. What happened this year was very, very unusual. We don't really get fires, even in these heavily wooded areas. We tend to not. It's not like California where you get a fire every year. We don't get that. This was really what they're saying was like a once in a century event. We had a freak windstorm. We don't get a lot of high winds either. We had a freak windstorm on Labor Day that was hurricane level, and then that's when the fires started, and including 2 large ones in you know, near Portland, the Portland metro area. And because our woods we're surrounded by woods, even in Portland metro area. It's not like a city and then outside are the woods. The woods come right up to the city and within. And then we had one further down by Eugene, and they were both huge, and they were about to combine, but the firefighters got a handle on it. So it's not that common. It's not like California where every year I worry about forest fires, because we have so much wet weather. You know, we're blessed by the fact that we get rain.
Yeah.
And it's helped our air is now clear, where 3 days ago we couldn't breathe.
Yeah, because of those horrible fires.
Again, on the planet.
Yeah. In terms of, like, in the time that you've been there, have you even heard of any terrorism threats, whether domestic or foreign?
No.
And then obviously,
I will tell you, the only thing we do have is we get, you know, and this is more lately we're getting, and they're coming down from Washington State, which is a whole other story. We're very different from Washington. The Proud Boys, and now they've finally gotten national attention, the Proud Boys and the Patriot Prayer groups that come down and try to really incite violence with Portlanders, because Portland being a very liberal city.
Yeah, and I remember hearing about the stuff that was going on around the City Hall area and stuff in reference to the protests. But then the federal government was getting involved in that too.
Yeah, they're gone now. We kicked them out. You'll be happy to know. But and this is something I actually want to touch upon for your listeners, that, you know, the news has been really, really strange, because they talk about, you know, they give the impression that Portland's on fire, and, you know, everybody's, you know, looting, and Literally everything that has been happening since the George Floyd murder up until today. They've been protesting every single day since that day. Not one day has gone by, but it's happening in a 2 square block area. It's all of everything that the news is talking about is happening in a 2 square block area of Portland. It is literally the size of a dime compared to the Portland metro area or even the city of Portland. So no, you can still go down to downtown Portland and have coffee and all those and go to restaurants, and you're not going to see protesters. It's just, it's unfortunate what the press has done.
Yeah. Again, it's just such a tragedy that everything's going on. So I want to end this on a positive note in terms of, some really important things. Now, you and I were going to do another podcast following up next week in reference and vlog in reference to upcoming Halloween episodes. So stay tuned on that. We won't tell you much more at this point. So there's your hook. But you have some amazing pictures on your website. You may mention that you're a photographer as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about your site?
Yeah, I travel all over the world, and I see myself really as a cultural photographer. Excuse me. I just before the pandemic, I was in Iceland last September, and then in December, I was in Cambodia. Mm-hmm. So there are some added things there. But
by the way, shout outs for both those vlogs and podcasts, because we have the debrief on you on that as well. But again, continue. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. But I'm also very, very keenly interested in local history, especially when I move somewhere. So I've done a lot of traveling around the state of Oregon. I'm very big on just, throwing my laptop and my camera gear in my car and taking off. So I've covered a lot of Oregon, and it's magnificent. I just really enjoy taking photographs. I mean, we have covered bridges. I'm doing a book on covered bridges right now. I've taken, and unfortunately, I think some of them have since burned down in the fires. But we had 53 covered bridges still intact in Oregon, which is something people don't think about. They don't realize, and they're absolutely gorgeous. They're just a throwback to the past when you needed to cross the river and you needed to have a covered bridge because it would ice over, because we live in a rainforest. So I'm currently doing a book. I was able to capture almost all of the covered bridges in Oregon.
Oh, nice.
And, of course, we have beautiful waterfalls. Willamette Falls is very well known. And I do a lot of photography. I've done a lot of photography locally as well.
And for those that are on the podcast who are not able to see the website, it's www.Frederico Photography, spelled out FREDERICOPHOTOGRAPHY.com. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Fantastic. Well, Marissa, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. I know we're going to talk to you a million times more because you're such an amazing guest. So thank you so much for all you do. We really appreciate it. Now, for my students that are out there, if you have any questions or comments, you are certainly welcome to reach out to me at scott@theprofessortravel.com. If you're on YouTube right now and you'd like to get notifications when there are new videos that come up, click the bell icon right above the screen. If you haven't already done so, please hit the subscribe button. And if you like this content and you'd like to see more of it, please give us a like so that way we can give you more of that. Also, if you're on the podcast, please feel free to rate us highly. We really appreciate that. But until next time, my name is Scott. I am the Professor Travel. Make every day a travel adventure. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.